Good morning or afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're at. I'm glad to be invited to speak here today about the future of the global veneer business. The focus of my speech today will be on rotary or peeled veneer rather than on sliced veneer. And today I will cover three key topic areas. First, I will talk a little bit about the structure and size of the global veneer industry, just to put things into perspective. Then secondly, I will talk a little more about some of the key trends in the industry and that impact the future of the industry. And then finally, I will tell you a little about the various business models that are available for the veneer producers. Okay, first let's take a look at the structure and size of the industry. And here on the left, you can see that China is the dominant player in the veneer business. It is by far the largest plywood producer in the world, and therefore also the largest veneer user, because most of the veneer is still used in plywood. Then also you can see here that most other regions of the world also produce some plywood. Every region that has some timber resource also produces plywood and therefore produces veneer. On the right here, I have taken North America as an example to illustrate the various veneer uses. On the blue, you can see the share of LVL in veneer use, and the red is plywood. And as you can tell, the LVL share has been increasing continuously for the past decade or so. In addition to this, veneer is used also, just as it is, as a standalone product for packaging and various other end uses. Then let's look at the veneer trade. First of all, I want to say that most of the veneer that is produced is used domestically, and a small minority of veneer goes to international trade. And both face veneers and core veneers are traded internationally. The core veneer trade tends to be cross-border trade between neighboring countries, but some of the face veneers travel a lot longer distances. And here too, China is the largest importer of veneer, followed by the US and India. China is also a very large exporter of veneer, but Vietnam, Russia, and Canada are even larger. And in fact, the biggest single trade flow in veneer trade goes from Vietnam into China. And this can amount for almost half of all the veneer trade that takes place internationally. So that's just a quick overview of the size and structure of the industry. Then let's move on to some of the key trends impacting the future of the business. And first of them is the increase of data-driven production in veneer. The veneer industry is evolving rapidly, and more data tools are being used in the industry. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are becoming reality within the industry. And with these tools, the veneer producers can improve their process control. They can implement predictive maintenance and operations, automated quality detection, and they'll likely be able to reduce unplanned downtime, and also use some of these tools for traceability of the raw material and the wood. Overall, one can say that more data will be gathered, but more importantly, more of the data that is gathered is taken into immediate and active use. The second trend here is the increased raw material scarcity. And this impacts many of the regions where veneer is produced, partly because the demand is growing, but also because there are increased protection requirements, increased sustainability and legality requirements, and also some climate change related factors impact the future timber supply, such as forest fires and epidemics, beetle epidemics. and other such issues, droughts. And finally, also log trade bans are reducing timber supply in some regions that are import dependent. On the positive side, plantation timber supply is increasing, especially in the southern hemisphere. Much of this timber is fairly small in diameter. So what this means is that in the future there will be less wood available, it will be smaller and of lower quality and more expensive. And what this means to the veneer industry is that there will have to be an even more focus on veneer recovery, both in value and volume, and increases in processing speeds, especially in peeling, and likely we'll have to do more veneer handling, such as composing, scarf jointing, and patching of the veneer, and there will be less face veneers available. However, a fair bit of the plantation timber that is coming online has been pruned, so there will be a fair bit of face veneer coming out of that resource. The third trend in the business is the increasing labor shortages, and this is a global phenomenon that impacts most veneer producing regions. It is becoming increasingly difficult to attract especially skilled labor to the remote locations where veneer is usually manufactured. So this means that veneer industry will have to focus even more on automation in its processes. Then the green economy and climate change mitigation are becoming increasingly important now, and this trend should favor wood and veneer as a renewable and carbon storing material. And finally, the final trend that I wanted to talk about is the era of disruptions. Many experts are predicting that there will be more frequent regional and global disruptions in the business, and some of them may be pandemics, some may be climate change related, such as storms, droughts, wildfires, and others. And then there will be also more frequent political disruptions, such as wars and other conflicts. And these disruptions impact both the manufacturing directly and also the logistics chains that the manufacturing businesses are dependent on. Okay, let's then move to talk about the various veneer business models. And here I've divided the business models into integrated and disintegrated models. So in an integrated model, we would produce both veneer and plywood, or veneer and LVL on the same side, versus in the disintegrated model, there would be standalone veneer plants and then standalone further manufacturing processes. And I will be telling you a little bit about the advantages of both types of production models. But first, let's talk a little bit about the pulp and paper industry. The pulp and paper industry is a good example of an industry segment where the competitive advantage has shifted over time from an integrated model towards a disintegrated model. In the late 1900s, it was common to produce pulp and paper in large integrated manufacturing units that made both pulp and paper or pulp and cardboard. But in the beginning of this century, the paper demand growth moved from having been focused on Europe and North America to China. China became the driver of paper and cardboard demand. And China in itself doesn't have a very large timber resource to get raw materials for pulp manufacturing. And therefore it became more competitive to produce pulp close to the resource, for example, in the Nordic countries and in Brazil or elsewhere in South America, and then producing paper and cardboard close to the market in China. It was much more efficient in the logistics system to haul the pulp rather than haul the raw materials for longer distances. And then the paper and cardboard producers in China were able to react more quickly to the changing demands in the local pulp, cardboard and paper markets. Well, could something like this also take place in the veneer-based industries? In some respects, this integration has been the case in some areas for quite a while already. For example, in China and the Western US, the disintegrated business model is quite common. And getting back to the advantages, some of the advantages of an integrated veneer and further manufacturing include the following. First, when you have everything integrated, you have better control of the entire value chain. And that makes it easier to use some of these modern data tools such as artificial intelligence and others when you know the entire process from the very beginning to the very end, from logs to the final product. Then also there are some economies of scale that come with an integrated model, for example, in maintenance and power supply, power use. And then you will have a shorter logistic chain when everything is integrated. And this is a key advantage now, especially when the logistics situation in the world is very chaotic. Well, the disintegrated model also has numerous advantages. For example, it is much easier to enter the business if you just make veneer. Your capital cost requirements are smaller, and then also your product mix is quite a bit simpler. And when you make just veneer, you can better maximize the value of the veneer when you sell each quality and size of veneer to the best and highest value end use. This assumes that there is a veneer market and number of veneer users that you can reach. Reversely, it also has benefits for the plywood and LVL producers. When you buy veneer rather than logs, you can optimize your raw material purchasing better and buy just what you want to use. Your end product quality is not tied to your log quality, and which means that you can specialize better in particular products and don't have to make any leftover products just to get rid of all the veneer that your logs might produce. In a disintegrated model, you can also optimize the transport. If your timber resource is quite far from the market, it may be more beneficial to produce veneer close to the resource and then the final product close to the market. This also allows you to take advantage of the just-in-time deliveries better. And here I have illustrated some of those models. The first model here is the typical integrated model that's common in Europe, Russia, much of South America, where you make both veneer and plywood at the same mill or veneer and LVL at the same site. In some cases, some of the veneer, though, may be sold to LVL producer from a plywood mill. The second model is kind of a typical model for especially the US West, where you have some standalone veneer producers that sell veneer both to LVL plants and plywood plants. The third model adds one player to the mix. It's a veneer trader. So we would have standalone veneer peelers that sell to a veneer trader, who then again sell to a LVL plant or plywood plant. And this model is fairly common in China. And in this type of model, the veneer trader tends to have quite a bit of power over the veneer producers, and it can act kind of as a gatekeeper between the veneer producer and the end user. On the other hand, it can also be beneficial for a veneer producer to use a trader, especially when they're entering the business or if they are entering a new geographic market. So they don't have to build an entire customer network themselves, but can rather sell most of their volume to just one or a few traders. And then finally, we have a fourth model where we have a standalone veneer plant that sells product directly to an end user who uses veneer as it is, for example, a fruit packer or a store display maker or something like that. So what will the future business models then look like? I guess the first answer is that they will look varied. There will not be one single model that will work for everybody. It'll depend on your region, the specific company, the structure of the downstream industry, and how the raw material versus markets are located, labor cost and availability, and also capital availability. For example, the forest investors have invested in veneer just to create value for their logs in certain regions of the world. Overall, I would say that this integrated model is likely to become more common than it is now because of the increasing scarcity of raw materials, and especially in situations where more than one species has to be used. The data-driven production would tend to favor an integrated model, however. But I'm thinking that instead of all the data-based manufacturing being company-based or within one company, it can also be network-based. So if there are multiple producers and users of veneer, it may be possible that there is a kind of a middle party who gathers the data from the veneer plants and the end users and optimizes the flows of veneer from the veneer plant to the final use. Also, it may be possible that some type of a digital veneer trading platform or commodity exchange may be created, where there may be some veneer plants that sell all of their veneer through that commodity exchange, and there may be some plywood mills that sell some of their excess volumes of veneer. And also there may be plywood producers and LVL producers who source all of their veneer through this platform, and some users who may just source some shortfalls that they have for a given order. Then finally, I was asked to come up with kind of a out of the box or even a utopian model of what a business model could look like in the future. And please take this as such. I'm not sure if this is ever gonna take place exactly the way I have imagined it here. But in this model that I came up with, we have a veneer service provider at the center of things. And the service provider would then supply veneer to a number of different type of end users, whether they are softwood plywood mills, hardwood plywood mills, or LVL mills. And they would supply exactly the type of veneer to these end users in that the exact quality that they need and in the same quantity that they need, or whatever quantity they need, and exactly when they need it. So in this model, veneer purchasing would become more like buying glue. You just get exactly the type of product that you need when you need it. The service provider in turn would buy logs and then might have them peeled by a service veneer peeling service contractor, or could peel it themselves, could peel them itself, and then would maintain a stock of the veneer and do veneer handling, such as strength grading, metric carding, or composing, patching, scarf joining, whatever it takes to get the veneer in the shape that it needs to be when it's delivered to the end user. And this model would require a fairly close relationship between the end users and the veneer service provider. The end users would have to supply either order stock volume data, or at the least production planning data to the service provider in order for the service provider to deliver exactly what they need when they need it to the end users. So over here, we kind of have two flows. We have the material flow here on the blue, and then we have the data flows here on the yellow. So most of the data would flow towards the service provider. And the key benefits of this model would be, there would be three key benefits. First of all, it would enable a better product focus for the end users and more specialization for the end users. Some plywood mills might do high-end specialty products, and while others might focus on bulk core products. And it would also optimize the material flow from the logs to veneer and would maximize the veneer values. So it could in fact benefit everybody. And then also it would allow for the use of the modern database tools and allow for data-driven value chain optimization. So this concludes my presentation here today. I hope it has given you some ideas on what kind of future you can create. And just like Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict a future is to create it. Thank you very much for your attention.